Hi students, welcome to lesson number 16, Cultural Processes, Cultural Evolution, Cultural Diffusionism, Acculturation, Enculturation, Ethnocentrism and Geocentrism. Humans are unique in their ability to use culture to adapt to new environment or changing the environment, both physical and cultural. Cultural man is considered to have existed on earth for more than 1.5 million years. Evidence of humans leading a socio and cultural life are available from this period. Thus, human beings were the first of species in the animal kingdom capable of producing culture. Once this capacity for building culture was attained, it led to a secure adaptation to their environment, which further generated a need and promoted man to live in the company of others. Man not only started experimenting with his environment, he also started sharing his experiences with fellow human beings, sometimes in their original form and at other times in any improvised and improved form. The beginning of human beings live in aggregates gave rise to the concept of society. Then man started organizing his experiences and behavior in an ordered form which gave rise to a systematized form of life. This constituted his culture. Both the rise and formation of society and culture went hand in hand. Biological evolution in man, a process of struggle for survival accompanied by cultural evolution. The students will be able to explain different types of cultural processes, trace the diversity of various cultural processes and discuss the nature of each cultural processes. Cultural evolution. Cultural evolution is the development of learned behavior as it is passed from one generation to the other. Cultural evolution is not confined only to humans, but it is found only in the primitive form in other groups of animals. For example, apes, which make and use tools to help gather food and pass on their learning skill to others. The ability to acquire culture and successfully transmit it from one generation to the next depends on genetically inherited characteristics. It is the process by which we are able to shape and adapt to our environment. It is a much more rapid process than biological evolution. It is transmitted as learned information from one generation to other. It required an intelligent brain and communication, preferably speech. The primary assumption of cultural evolution is that societies develop from simple to complex, albeit at different rates, which explains why different types of societies exist in the world. E.B. Tylor, Lewis Henry Morgan and Herbert Spencer all played a part in the development of the theories of cultural evolution. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the subject was viewed as a unilinear phenomena that describes the evolution of human behavior as a whole. It has since been understood as a multilinear phenomena that describes the evolution of Indian cultures or societies. Unilinear theory of cultural evolution. Unilinear evolution, also called unilineal evolution, is a theory of cultural progression, first espoused by early anthropologists and social theorists like H. Morgan, E.B. Tylor and others. The basic premise is that societies develop organically along a single trajectory form from primitive to civilized, and that all societies were beholden to these rules. It takes its roots from older Darwinian evolutionary theory, which notes the tendency of organisms to progress from simple to complex over time. Societies went from tribal hunter-gatherer lifestyles to agrarian slave societies to agrarian feudal societies before industrializing and becoming capitalist societies. Modern evolutionary biologists know the evolutionary progression from simple to complex is not a sign of being more or less evolved, but simply being more suitable, adapted for a given environment or situation. Modern anthropologists also know that so-called savage or primitive people also astoundingly complex in a large number of ways, such as in language, kinship obligations, gift exchange rules, and so on, and that technology is only a single and often irrelevant cultural facet. Modern anthropologists also know that culture can only ever be more adapted and does not exist anywhere on a development spectrum. Multilinear theory of cultural evolution. Multilinear evolution is a concept which attempts to account for diversity. It essentially means identification of different sequential patterns of different culture or types of culture. This theory holds that change can occur in several ways and that it does not inevitably lead in the same direction. It is understood that human culture has evolved along a number of lines. Further, a number of American anthropologists, including Leslie A. White, Julian H. Stewart, Marshall D. Shalins, and Elman R. Service, posted that while no specific evolutionary changes are experienced by all cultures universally, human societies do generally evolve or progress. They further suggested that primary mechanism for such progress involved technological breakthroughs that make societies more adaptable to and dominant over the environment. Technology in this case was quite broadly conceived and included such developments as improvements in tool forms or material, as with the transition through the stone, bronze and iron ages, and later the Industrial Revolution. It can also be seen in transportation from pedestrian to equestrian to motorized forms, and food production as from food hunting and gathering to culture societies. Proponents of multilinear evolution hold that only in this sense the whole of world culture can be viewed as the product of a unitary process. Cultural diffusionism. Diffusion, also known as cultural diffusion, is a social process through which elements of culture spread from one society or social group to another, which means it is in essence a process of social change. It is also the process through which innovations are introduced into an organization or social group, sometimes called the diffusion of innovations. Things that are spread through diffusion include ideas, values, concepts, knowledge, practices, behaviors, material and symbols. Sociologists and anthropologists believe that culture is the primary way through which modern societies develop the culture that they have today. Further, they note that the process of diffusion is distinct from having elements of a foreign culture forced into a society, as was done through colonization. The general principles of cultural diffusion are: the society or social group that borrows element from another will alter or adapt these elements to fit within their own culture. Typically, it is only elements of a foreign culture that fit into the already existing belief systems of the host culture will be borrowed. The culture elements that do not fit within the host culture's existing belief system will be simply rejected by the members of the social group. Cultural elements will only be accepted within the host culture if they are useful within it. Social groups that borrow cultural elements are more likely to borrow again in the future. Patterns of diffusion. The three basic patterns of diffusion are direct contact, intermediate contact, and stimulus diffusion. Direct contact. Elements of a society's culture may first be taken up by neighboring societies and then gradually spread farther and farther afield. The spread of the use of paper is a good example of extensive diffusion by direct contact. Intermediate contact. Diffusion by intermediate contact occurs through the agency of the third party. Frequently, traders carry a cultural trait from that society that originated it to another group. For example, at times soldiers serve as the intermediaries in spreading a cultural trait. European crusaders such as the Knights, Templars and the Knights of St. John acted as intermediaries in two ways. They carried Christian culture to the Muslim societies of North Africa and brought Arab culture back to Europe. Stimulus diffusion. In stimulus diffusion, knowledge of trait belonging to another culture stimulates the invention or development of a local equivalent. For example, the idea of McDonald's burgers was acceptable but not in the original form, hence stimulus diffusion. Acculturation. Acculturation refers to the changes that occur when different culture groups come into intensive contact. Anthropologists use the term acculturation to describe a situation in which one of the societies in contact is much more powerful than the others. Thus, acculturation can be seen as a process of extensive cultural borrowing in the context of superordinate and subordinate relations between societies. Acculturation then is the process of systematic cultural change of a particular society carried out by an alien dominant society. This change is brought about under conditions of direct contact between the individuals of each society. Individuals of a foreign or minority culture learn the language, habits and values of a standard or dominant culture or by the cultural process of acculturation. Acculturation processes vary considerably depending upon the wishes of the more powerful society, the attitudes of the less powerful and whether there is any choice. More powerful societies do not always want individuals from another culture to assimilate or melt into the dominant culture completely. Instead, they may prefer and even actively promote a multicultural society. Multiculturalism can be voluntary or any rise out of deliberate segregation. Then too, even though the less powerful groups may be pressured to acquire some of the dominant group cultural traits, they may resist or even reject those cultural elements at least for a considerable length of time. The process of acculturation also applies to immigrants, most of whom, at least nowadays, choose to leave one country for another. Immigrants are almost always a minority in the new country and therefore are in a subordinate position. If the immigrant culture changes, it is almost always in the direction of the dominant culture. Immigrants groups vary considerably in the degree and speed with which they adopt the new culture and the social roles of the new society in which they live. An important area of research is explaining the variation in acculturation and assimilation. Assimilation is a concept very similar to acculturation, but assimilation is a term more often used by sociologists to describe the processes by which individuals acquire the social roles and culture of the dominant group. Assimilation can be described as a series of stages through which an individual must pass. These three stages are behavior assimilation, structural assimilation, and marital assimilation of these individuals of the minority society and individuals of the dominant society. Although these proposals have been criticized, it does indicate that there is a continuum through which individuals pass, beginning with acculturation and ending with complete assimilation. Complete assimilation is not the inevitable consequence of acculturation due to the value system of the minority or weaker culture being a part of the entire configuration of culture. It may not always be possible nor desirable for the minority culture to take over the complete way of life of the majority culture. Often a period of transition follows where the minority society increasingly loses faith in its own traditional values but is unable to adopt the values of the dominant culture. During this transition period, there is a feeling of dysphoria in which individuals in the minority society exhibit feelings of insecurity and unhappiness. Acculturation and assimilation have most often been studied in European immigrants coming to the United States during the 19th and 20th centuries, as well as minority groups already living in the United States. European white ethnics have experienced a higher rate of assimilation than non-white, non-European and more recently immigrated groups. These studies have resulted in several important cross-cultural generalizations about the process of acculturation and assimilation. These cross-cultural generalizations can be studied in the following ways. First, dominant cultures coerce minorities and foreigners to acculturate and assimilate. This process is slowed down considerably when minorities are territorially or occupationally concentrated, such as in the case of large native minorities who often become ethno-nationalist. Second, acculturation must precede assimilation. Third, even though a minority may be acculturated, assimilation is not always the end result. And fourth, acculturation and assimilation serve to homogenize the minority group into the dominant group. The many factors facilitating or preventing this homogenization include the age of the individuals, ethnic background, religious and political affiliations, and economical level. Enculturation. Enculturation is the process whereby individuals learn their group's culture through experience, observation, and instruction. To learn is to develop the knowledge and skills needed to participate in the communal cultural practices and to become a fully functional member of the community. At the same time, cultures are constantly evolving with new cultural practices and new tools to improve their interaction with the physical and social environments. In simple words, we can say that the process by which an individual learns the traditional content of a culture and assimilates its practices and values. Adamson Hubel says enculturation is both a conscious and unconscious conditioning process where a man, as a child and adult, achieves competence in his culture, internalizes his culture, and becomes thoroughly encultured. Anthropologist Margaret Mead clearly defined enculturation in 1963 as a process distinct from socialization. Enculturation refers to the actual process of cultural learning which a specific cultural one internalization, the dreams and expectations, the rules and requirements not just for the larger society seen as a whole, but as for every specific demand within the whole. Society does whatever is necessary to aid any one of its members in learning process and appropriate behavior for any given social setting and in meeting the demands of any challenge. Enculturation begins before birth and continues until death. Thus, one learns respect for the symbols of the nation through reciting a pledge of allegiance and singing the national anthem in school. He learns with whom he may be physically violent, such as wrestling with a competitor, or with whom he cannot, just like a little gun down the street. He becomes aware of his rights and obligations and privileges as well as the rights of the others. Sociologist Talcott Parsons spoke of the birth of a new generation of children as a recurrent barbarian invention. One reason he said that was because human infants do not possess culture at birth. They have no consumption of the word, no language or a morality. It is in this sense that Parsons uses the word barbarian in reference to infants. They are uncultured, unsocialized persons. All an infant needs to live and cope up within the cultural context awaiting him is acquired through the process termed enculturation by the anthropologist and socialization by the sociologist. We may define enculturation as a process by which individuals acquire the knowledge, skills, attitudes and values that enable them to become functioning members of their societies. Awaiting the infant is a society possessing a culture, an ordered way of life. The child possesses certain possibilities for processing information and developing desires, making it possible for that ordered way of life to influence him. These enduring competencies and standards of judgment, along with attitudes and motives, form the personality. The personality in turn influences the culture. Various anthropologists have tended to regard enculturation as consisting of such processes as socialization, the acquiring of the culture, and cultural integration, excluding an innovative process of enculturation. Enculturation is the process whereby established culture influences and teaches an individual, group, or organization to the extent that the target adopts a particular culture's values, norms, and the target finds an accepted role within the established culture. The concept is distinct from acculturation, cultural adjustment, and cultural adaptation. The individual process of enculturation also applies to enculturation within organization. An awareness of the processes of enculturation is important in effective intercultural training. The process of enculturation is not entirely passive or unconscious, as the cultural transmission involves processes of teaching and learning that are reflective, deliberate, incidental and functional. Ethnocentrism. The term was coined by American Yale professor William Graham Sumner. Sumner has defined ethnocentrism as the view of things in which one's group is the center of everything and others are scaled and rated with reference to it, and each group nourishes its own pride and vanity, boosts itself superior, exalts its own divinities, and looks within contact of outsiders. It is the term anthropologists use to describe the opinion that one's own way of life is natural or correct. Some would simply call it as cultural ignorance. Ethnocentrism means that one may see his or her own culture as the correct way of living. For those who have not experienced the other's cultures in depth can be said to be ethnocentric if they feel that their lives are more natural way of living. Some cultures may be similar or overlap in ideas or concepts. However, some people are in a sense shocked to experience differences that may encounter with individuals culturally different than themselves. In extreme cases, a group of individuals may see another cultures as a way of life and consider it wrong. Because of this, the group may try to convert the other group to their own ways of living. Fearful wars and genocide could be the devastating result if a group is unwilling to change their ways of living. Characteristics of ethnocentrism. An individual with an ethnocentric view identifies strongly within a group ethnicity, culture, and so on, feels proud, vain, superior about in-group, views economic, political, social events from the point of their in-group, define their cultural elements as correct and natural, thinks in-group norms are universal, defines other culture element as incorrect and unnatural, feels like others' ethnicities and cultures are inferior. An example for ethnocentrism is our own custom and ideas may appear bizarre or barbaric to other observers from another society. Hindus in India, for example, would consider the custom of eating beef disgusting. In their culture, the cow is a sacred animal and may not be slaughtered for food. Another example of ethnocentrism is colonialism. It can be defined as cultural domination with enforced social change. Colonialism refers to the social system in which the political conquest by one society of another leads to cultural domination with enforced social change. A good example to look at when examining colonialism is the British overtake of India. The British had little understanding of the culture in India, which created a lot of problems and unrest during the rule. Geocentrism. What is geocentrism culture? Geocentric culture is a culture of a global company. This culture has to go above and beyond different national cultures that employees bring with them and foster those beliefs and values that are clear, relevant and desirable to every employee regardless of their national, professional, educational, political and other backgrounds. Geocentric organizational culture. A geocentric organizational culture is a corporate culture of global corporations. A global corporation is the fourth and the last phase known today in a for-profit company's global status evolution, which is preceded by domestic, international and multinational phases. Global companies strive is to be both profitable and socially accepted. The global corporation seeks to establish a new win-to-win form of relationship with other entities. The underlying premise is a possibility of finding a balance between making profit and being socially responsible. A role of cooperation between small and large businesses and a cautious use of non-renewable and development of renewable sources. The global corporation is characterized by a genocentric organizational culture that transcends cultural differences and establishes beacons, values and attitudes that are comprehensive and compelling for all employees regarding of their national origins or professional experiences. Characteristics of geocentric culture. In a geocentric organizational culture, the persons or employees feel connected to the companies via business goals of achieving high profits and attracting more customers. Employees are valued by the company where employees' creativity was welcomed and where they could share their creativity with others. Employees from different places contribute to the corporation as they have unique knowledge of the culture and language of their native countries. Creativity and unique contribution due to the national identity represent the elements of a geocentric organizational culture that reflect the underlying assumption that ideas ultimately come from the employees. In a geocentric culture, people are treated as capable and motivated. They are trusted to find the best solutions and to take care of individual, team or organizational problems. Relying on new and creativity ideas of employees, helps global companies feel safe when introducing an innovation and hence maintain their competitive advantage. Therefore, these elements foster employee involvement in the organization and make employees feel valued. In geocentric organizational culture, the employees feel that they are growing personally and professionally through the professional development opportunities provided by their companies, cross-cultural awarenesses and perspective consciousness. Providing professional development opportunities is also one of the best attributes of the company professional development. Cross-cultural awareness and perspective consciousness represent the elements of geocentric organizational culture that show an organization's assumption about the nature of human character, activity and diversity. In a geocentric culture, people are considered good and active. Their work is evolving and intertwined with learning and joy. Diversity is the best and only way for organizational survival in the external environment and for the internal stability. Therefore, these elements foster employees regardless of their nations, cultures, educational or professional background to continuously grow personally and professionally. In this lesson, we attempted to understand what cultural processes is and how different cultural processes operate in the society. We also tried to establish the relationship between individual, culture and society, and it is found that they were intertwined and interrelated. Cultural processes like cultural evolution, diffusionism, acculturation, enculturation, ethnocentrism and geocentrism comprise all the procedures through which people transform the world as it is into a world of our own. This includes all group specific norms and rules, values and ideas, information and knowledge as represented, exchanged, appropriated, altered and created anew in the process of change and development.